Now, welcome back. The South African public continues to bear the brunt of the country's difficult economic environment. And yesterday, public sector employees signed the government's 1.5% wage offer of a below-inflation salary increase. And this, of course, accompanied by a monthly cash allowance of over R1,000 per month. And unions say that they had to concede that public finances are under immense pressure due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which necessitated the government to provide income relief measures. And most industries, both in the public and the private sector, had to either retrench or, in some instances, had to freeze salaries since the economic downturn that resulted from the COVID-19 outbreak last year. And we now talk to former Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises, who is currently the ANC's Head of Economic Transformation, Mr. Enoch Godongwana. Mr. Godongwana, morning and welcome to Morning Live.
Morning and to Morning Live and to your viewers.
Let's just start with a quick snapshot and assessment from the ANC's perspective of the current state of the economy of the country, and how does the ANC see this moving forward?
Let me just say, the economy has been in bad shape starting from 2015 to last year. And that problem has been made worse by the coronavirus. So we're in a difficult situation, but the positive is signs. If you look at the first quarter, the numbers have improved a great deal in the first quarter. There's also an outlook for the year. A number of the outlook is, depending who you talk to, some of the economists are predicting between 3.5 and 4.2. For instance, Nedbank has revised outlook despite the unrest from 3.8 to 4.2%. So there's really a positive outlook moving forward.
As you say, depending on who you speak to, because it is hotly contested about, where exactly we are, where we're headed as a nation. And just looking at the economic inequality in the country that has deepened over the years, how is the ANC planning to make some meaningful inroads in this regard?
Yeah, let me just agree with you in the sense that GDP growth does not on its own translate into large employment creation. So extraordinary other measures are important to do that. First, let me just say we're grappling with this question at the moment. As ANC, you must know last year we produced a document in June which was translated into into the recovery plan by government. One of the things we're doing is to translate that recovery plan in government into realistic targets and objectives to impact on unemployment, poverty, and inequality. In addition to that, if you look at the labor force survey, and 1.6 of the people that are unemployed are between the age 15 to 24. 2.8 are between the age 24 and 35. The first category really is supposed to be in the school system. In the real world, they should not be part of the unemployment pool. So we need measures, in my view. In addition to that, the first measure we need to do, how to translate those people into productive employees for the future. In other words, what kind of skills development we need to think about that category. That's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is that of the 7.2 unemployed, I'm using the narrow definition for the purpose of this discussion, 151,000 of them are graduates. 540,000 of them have got some tertiary education. What that means, even that grouping, in my view, we need to be thinking how to translate, find transition to work environment. So that's the kind of thinking we need to be talking about. In addition to that, we need to then say, what are the kind of other measures which are going to be necessary to make sure that the rest of those who are unemployment, there has to be some income support of some kind.
And every time it comes back to where is the money going to come from? But beyond, the big political speak and rhetoric, I think it needs to be broken down to its rudiments, Mr. Godongwana. In May, when we were celebrating World Hunger Day, according to it's called the NIDS, I'm just trying to find the name, the NIDS Cram survey. They estimated that as many as 10 million adults and nearly 3 million children in South Africa experienced hunger. That was just in that week commemorating that day. And 2.5 million adults and 600,000 children in this country experience perpetual hunger. That's hunger every day or almost every day. These are the realities of what we need to address, Mr. Godongwana. So if we take away all the fancy talk and, high-level policy speak, how are we addressing that situation? Because it's an untenable one. You cannot have that many people hungry in this country.
Let me make a few points. The first one is that I'm not sure how accurate those figures are. Let me just say, for instance, it is a fact that 18 million South Africans are under one form of government social security or another. 18 million. Now, that's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is that government is concerned about poverty in this country. That's why government has extended the 350 rand to the end of the fiscal year. The third point is that by the end of the fiscal year, we would have designed a permanent feature which will ensure that we address the issue of poverty and unemployment as a whole. So that work is being done. So it's not only talk, high-level talk. I'm talking about 18 million people who are getting grants from government. I don't know if you take that as a percentage, but 30% of the population is getting those grants. So that's not high talk. 350 rand now, it may be small, but that discussion is taking place to revise the entire system, which by the beginning of the next fiscal year, that will be implemented.
And I totally agree with you. And, it's a futile exercise in you and I in any way quibbling about, 350 rand because to someone it means a meal on the table for a day to a week. So that's neither here nor there. The reality is that it's because a government is unable to get people working, to create those conditions that would allow people to work and therefore take care of themselves, that we need to have 18 million South Africans dependent on some or other form of grant. And when you say that you have now come up with a feature that would actually take care of this grant system that would make sure that South Africans do have some form of money that they can access, what exactly are we talking about? What will that be?
Let me just say, I hold probably a different view to a number of people who have made views on this point. And lastly, what I'm trying to argue to you today is basically my own views. First, if you look at the figure I've highlighted for you, the 1.6 between 15 and 24, the 2.8 between 24 and 35, that constitutes 62% of the unemployed. It is my considered opinion that we can't condemn young people of that age to perpetual dependence on grants. And therefore, a different dispensation must be made to ensure that those people, A, they are properly trained, B, there's transition to work so that they should lead a productive life. What that means is that whatever measures we do, in addition to that, we must find ways of growing this economy to such an extent that it can absorb those people into into the economy once the necessary skills development has taken place. Thirdly, then we need to look at the remainder of the population, not everybody, those that cannot find employment, and cushion the impact on them.
So, and I like when you say that, there needs to be a different dispensation, but who is going to develop the guidelines, the framework of that different dispensation? And I want to quote for you Mr. Godongwana, American economist Hyman Minsky, and he says, and I quote, "Economic issues must be a serious public matter and the subject of debate if new directions are to be undertaken," which is what you are saying. But he goes on to say that meaningful reform cannot be put over by an advisory and an administrative elite that is itself the architect of the existing situation, unquote. So how are we going to look at this new dispensation? How is it going to be different in terms of formulating those policies that will put us on a new path?
I've said that we have given ourselves the next 6 months to come up with a new dispensation. That's why we've said a temporary measure, we must extend to 350 rand to give us space to work on the new dispensation. So there's definitely, we've set ourselves timelines. By the time we get into the next financial year, we should have actually come to a different proposal of how to deal with unemployment and poverty.
So if we look at what's happened over the past few weeks in South Africa, to what extent do you believe that the country has been set back economically, especially by the looting of businesses that we saw?
It is a setback at a number of levels. It has impacted on a number of economic activities, particularly in the relevant province. We must understand both Gauteng and KZN are significant economic hubs for the country. So we still licking the wounds from around, there's no doubt of it. But my fear is largely more than that. To what extent is the investor perception about South Africa in the long term? Are they likely to see this as an outlier or as a particular feature of the South African political economy, in which case you're likely to see the investment flows out of South Africa? So it's too early to say what that means. But what is positive is that what I've seen in most of the reports I cited, for instance, the Nedbank report, which I've seen, which suggests that despite this unrest, their forecast for the economy is revised upwards from 3.8 to 4.2, which suggests that from an investment perspective, it may be seen this may be seen as an outlier, not a major issue. So it may not have a serious impact on the economy moving forward.
And that's the other thing, because, again, as you and I both know and understand, there are various schools of thoughts on all of these matters. So one school of thought, for example, contends that part of the problem is that when the South African government sits and looks at policy formulation, it tends to do this as if it is legislating for Denmark, whereas South Africa is decidedly and markedly third world. Yet our policies sometimes would suggest that we are first world. So what's your view in that regard?
Look, that debate is an interesting one because someone, like, take a labor legislation. Somebody who's in the unions would say, propose a legislation which is basically in European standards. But at some point, somebody was going to say, no, but we're in Africa. Our legislation is not in tandem with Africa at all. So you can go into a number of things. If you look at the social security, for instance, and you say, well, a country of this magnitude, take our peers, maybe close to is Brazil and a few countries that are characterized as our peers, which have developed a well-established social security system. So, yes, the point is the following. I was once in Canada in 1992. People were debating, and one of these Canadians said, no, these guys, their aspiration is to be a developed world. So that's where we're aspiring to. We should not be worried about the debate. We should say, what is our aspiration? Our aspiration is to be a developed economy.
Except that you need to have all the various factors in place that would allow you to get there. We can't wish away some of the very poor conditions that we have at the moment. You look at our education system and what we are producing in that regard. You look at the deepening inequality that we touched on earlier. All of those factors cannot be wished away. We can't be aspirational in tackling them in any real way. We have to actually get down there and make sure that we address the problems, Mr. Godongwana.
Look, Sakina, you're raising important issues today, I must say. But let me just say, take the education issue. You look at our budget and say, is South Africa, compared to its peers, spending less on education? My answer is no. Then you must ask, what is the problem? Then it may well be that the problem is that the efficiency of delivery of the system. So we need to look into those issues. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about the fact that to some extent, the ANC has admitted that over the past 10 years or so, we've dropped the ball, if I may say. For instance, if in one of the reviews, look at the 25-year review between 1994 and 2019 by government itself, the 25-year review cite, among other things, two things which have contributed to this economy, which are of our own making. The first one is the electricity shortages. It is unacceptable that we've had shortages since 2008. We continue spending our time fixing ESCOM than fixing electricity supply. The second issue that is citing in that report, which is of our own making, has been the weakening of state institutions through various means, including corruption. So those issues, we must admit, have not helped the economy and therefore exacerbated unemployment and poverty issues. Those are issues that have got to be tackled head on moving forward.
And then to the point of investor sentiment and investor confidence, just taking that a little further, Mr. Godongwana, firstly, I also read a few reports because I was curious to see what would happen and what the investor sentiment would be post the looting spree. And it would seem as though investor confidence wasn't dented much. And that didn't surprise me because investors are not philanthropic. They are here because there's money to be made. So they're not going anywhere in a hurry because there's money to be made. But let's assume for a moment that they were discouraged and they did decide to take flight. Given the mineral resources, the abundant wealth of mineral resources that we have in this country, why couldn't the government see opportunity in that, to use that for the betterment of this country and its people? Look at what countries like Libya have done in the past with their mineral wealth and how they've used that to boost not just their economy, but the livelihoods of their citizens. Are we not thinking about that, Mr. Godongwana?
It would be interesting by saying, what would that entail, that boosting of the... because what government does, what government does really in most resource economies is to extract excessive rents from the mineral resources. Now, if you say in South Africa, the question you must pose, are we not getting sufficient rents or in the form of tax in the mining sector. That's an open question which needs to be discussed. That's the first point. The second point is that in this environment, there's competition for investment in the mining sector. You will hear a number of economists saying that there's one commodity boom cycle which we missed, precisely because we were spending most of our time how to deal with the mining sector. At the moment, one of the growth areas is the mining sector because there's a commodity boom. And therefore, we must be extracting better rents arising out of that. So I don't know what else people think should be done.
Unfortunately, I can't tell you right now, but let's fix another date so we can push that peanut a little further.
I'm ready to entertain that.
I would love us to do that and open up this discussion.
As I'm saying, we don't sit here with all ready-made answers. We need some thinking from different sectors of the economy to say what should be done. It would be foolish to think that we sit here and have all the answers. Not at all. If the different perspective of how to skin the cat, that's fine. Let's listen to those ideas.
Absolutely. Mr. Godongwana, thanks for your time. Ina Godongwana is the ANC's head of economic transformation, discussing the economic plight of the country and just looking at some of the challenges and perhaps also where we can look at to strengthen what we already have and perhaps move ourselves out of the doldrums in this regard. It's 7 o'clock now, time for the latest news.